Hi, my name is Stevie at the Sensorica lab in Montreal. So here's another video where we talk about the IT infrastructure that we use for the Sensorica environment, for the Sensorica Open Value Network to steward our open ventures. And this video is timely because it showcases how this IT infrastructure and more particular how the NRP, the tool that we use to manage resources together to co-create, right? Um, how this tool handles the material side of things. Okay, so until now, we have been working on the Greens for Good venture, and most of the activities have been time, people exercising their skills to conceptualize what it is that we want to build, and performing activities such as outreach and even planning and conceptualization of the device that we want to build, and also doing some mechanical design work, 3D modeling, and so on and so forth. So all these activities, it's can be described as time contributions into this venture, and these time contributions are logged into the NRP, the network resource planning, and you can see, for example, here all these contributors and their roles. I don't know if you see the pop-up. Yes, you do, and their roles in this venture. So let's take, for example, me, community building, training others. So all these are time contributions, and you can see the list of all the contributions to the projects right here. So again, why is this important, this video? It's because now we are transitioning from just administrative and design work type activities towards prototyping, and that involves the use of physical spaces, like the Sensorica lab, like the lab of Anthony in Ontario, and also involves the use of consumable materials like 3D printing filament and timing belts. We'll see an example of that, and some equipment like 3D printers, so on and so forth. So let's go through it and see how the system handled this. But before, let's have a little look at the Greens for Good homepage again. Just a bit of orientation. So if you want to find this venture and see what's going on, you just use the search and Greens for Good, and you'll end up landing on the project or ventures page. One of the new things, so this is the digital environment. This is the digital environment where all the contributors to this venture, all the affiliates of this venture interact together. And this is the first stop for anybody that wants to see if somebody has missed something, gone away for a week or two, they can come back to this website and to this web page and catch up with the project what it is. This is an orientation tool, and we did a bit of work into redesigning these orientation tools. So if you want to see what's going on here in the venture, all these windows are clickable, so it tells you that you can find the project page, you can join Discord and interact with people. You can see all the documentation of the project by clicking here and go to the NRP, which is actually the tool that we wanted to talk about. This is built for stigmatic, and that's why the little bug there. So yeah, so just take a look and navigate on these things. So it's good that we're going through this session here orientation for the venture, because we're gonna navigate through the digital environment towards the NRP, and so we see how the NRP handles these material resources and material contributions. Again, the documentation of the project, you can anything that we do is documented and shared publicly right there. All right, so how does the NRP handle material resources? Okay, so let's take the work package of deliverables, where we actually talking about the design of the thing, the design of this tool, this physical equipment for processing proteins from green leaves, or extracting proteins. And if you want to, if you go to this document here, this is where you'll see everything that people are doing for this venture. Okay, now part of these deliverables, we have created a little fork for the development of a little device that is called the decanter centrifuge. So I'm just going to navigate towards it fast. Decanter centrifuge, and I'm going to open that particular document there. So you can see these documents as stigmatic physical environments. And why do I call it stigmatic? It's because if you look towards the end of all these documents, you'll see some icons that we call digital pheromones. And let's let the document finish loading here, because it's pretty intense. There's a lot of pictures, and so if we navigate to the end of the document, well, look at that, it's 53 pages. You have these signalization icons that you can find on the left of the page, and they tell you things about what people have done and things to pay attention to, things to do, so you can here find some tasks for yourself. For example, this little man with the shovel means that there is something to do for you. So as you navigate through the document, you pay attention on the left, and you'll probably find some of these pheromones which are supposed to tell you something important about activity. Okay, pheromones are about activity. So yeah, so this is the decanter centrifuge. This is a device, and you can go through it. So there is the design consideration phase, where we conceptualize the thing. There is a design phase where we 3D model the thing, and there is the prototyping phase, where we 3D print parts, assemble them, and actually do physical experiments. So if you go to the design phase, these are time contributions. Some of us, especially Anthony, is doing a lot of work in the 3D modeling of this. So you can have the full, the access to the full 3D model of this particular thing. So that is the virtual representation, the digital representation of what we want to build. But we are going to focus now on the physical part of it. So blah 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 blah. So just notice the pheromones here. That's part of the stigmatic. So I'm also presenting this digital environment because the whole thing is interesting. But bear with me. We're gonna get to the to how the NRP handles physical stuff. So here are here is the work about the design. It's we're talking about different features of the design, some problems that we find with it. We discuss these things, and so on and so forth. So let me go back to the beginning and go to the prototyping phase. And here you can see that the thing that you saw as a CAD file, it's actually 3D printed. This is thanks to Anthony, who did it incredibly fast. It's the first prototype. It doesn't mean it's perfect, but it's enough for us to start working with it, take it for a spin, and see how it behaves, and learn about the physics of separation of proteins from leaf juices. And as we're doing these kind of things, we are handling materials. We are using 3D printers. We are using spaces. We are using filaments for 3D printing. We're using screws, so on and so forth. We are using motors and power supplies. So this tells you about how to print these devices and how to assemble them. So now let's navigate from this document. On every one of these pages, you have log your contributions, which is a link that leads directly to the NRP. So if I'm lucky enough, if I'm lucky enough, my computer is slow because I'm recording at the same time. This is what I wanted to see, the link. So it goes to the NRP and to a particular process that we call process. So work is organized in processes where people have logged contributions for the design and prototyping of this device. So you can see here that this process is part of this open venture here, which we call a context. And these are all the contributions that people have logged in terms of time. Okay, but if you go to the bottom of this document, you see something very interesting. You see consumable inputs. Okay, so what is that we're using? So we're using FDM 3D printing filament. Okay, and we are using some other inputs such as equipment like a power supply, and we are using motors. So you can see that. Okay, so let's just see a bit how this is structured and how the NRP handles the data and creates the data structure in the background, right? So above here you have the work. This is all about time. Okay, so if I do something about information mining, I can fill up this form here, and I choose the today's date. My name is Tibi, and I am saying that I work 2 hours, and I put a description. That's how I input my time contribution based on some of these roles that are already part of this form. Okay, R&D mechanics. This is what Anthony is mostly logging here. You can do documentation. I do a lot of that. You can see a lot of my my inputs here, as well as some other people's inputs. So that is the part of the time, okay? And these contributions go into the project. Let me open, let's see, this is the page of the Greens for Good venture. Okay, so you see venture is Greens for Good. These are all the time contributions of people. Okay, these are all the processes that are active, that people are working on, and we are diving into the deliverables. So this is what we're looking at here, right? If you click this link right here, you are going to land on the deliverable process. Okay, so these are active processes within this venture. And and I'm just looking because I see that some people have put some data into the system. I'll go check it. I'll go check it later. But okay, so let's go back to the process and see how we handle physical resources. So let's dive into the consumable inputs. The section here, it tells you that we are using some filaments, and then the system tells you that we have on hand at the Sensorica lab or somewhere else, we have different types of 3D printing filament. We have the PLA PHA, we have the bamboo, and we have the PETG. Okay, and if you look below here, we have already consumed 407 grams of this. The project has consumed that, right? So this is a clickable link which leads to the page of that resource, okay, which is this consumable. of a 3D printing filament, and you can see that we have in stock still over 5 kilograms, and we used 400 and something grams. Its location, it's at the Sensorica main lab. And access rules this is something that has been purchased specifically for this project, and it is only to be used in the context of this venture for now. So that is in the inventory, okay? And you can see here where this filament came from, and you can see that it has been purchased. That's a purchased exchange. It has been purchased not too long ago. All right, and you can have the access to the you can have direct access to the invoice or to the bill, and this is the purchase of this particular thing, right? So let's go back here. So this is the event, that's the purchase event that has been recorded for buying this particular filament, okay? And now what we see is that this particular filament is used in the context of this project, and the other ones are not used. I can log the consumption here if I want, but we're not using these filaments, okay? Timing belt, that's another thing that we use. Again, we can click on the timing belt here on the resource and see what it is. Well, it's something that is used to transfer motion from a motor to a mechanical device. You see that its location is at the Sensorica lab, and we only have one left. All right, we only have one left because 2 of them are being used. 2 of them are being used in this particular project, and we have a spare one. All right, so if I delete this contribution, this quantity will update back to 3 because it says that that this project is not using it anymore. So you can see where these are used. 2 of them are used into the deliverables for the Greens for Good project, which this leads to the same thing. So you see how the data is interconnected, right? You can find these resources also by going to the inventory, and here you see everything that the NRP has as a record of stuff that we use. So let's say we take material item, so we're looking for parts, and we're looking for equipment. So we're gonna filter the database, the inventory for these type of material assets. So if I do timing belt, here you go, I find my part. So this is a part mechanical, it's a timing belt, and it tells you what type of timing belt. So this is a resource type. It's a sort of a category that can hold many different type of timing belts, and if we click here, we go to the same page. Okay, so that's how data is structured by the NRP, and you can see here that there is already a process that is using 2 timing belts, and we go full circle back to the same deliverable process that is requiring 2 of these items. Okay, here we go. So here we go, we're going full circle here. Usable inputs, we're using power supplies, and so the inventory on hand, we have many different power supplies, but we are using now this particular one for motor drive and stepper motors. So if I click here, you see that that's the page of the power supply, reserve for Green for Good, and it has been put into the system through a purchase. Again, a purchase. We have the price, and this purchase has been logged by me because I'm the one that purchased it, right? So good. What else can we use? electric motors. All right, we have this particular motor here on hand, and we're using two in this particular project. So we bought two motors, we put it into the system, and we're using it for this project. But let's go through some other things and add some other requirements, which is, for example, space. So let's say we use lab space, and that is something that somebody might contribute with to the venture. So I can I'm just creating the requirement now to say that in this particular process of prototyping, well, we need some space to work on. So then here's the lab space as an input requirement, which is a usable. It's not a consumable. If I work at the Sensorica lab, I don't diminish the space. I might, use some things in the space, but I don't deplete the space. And so it's a usable, like any other piece of equipment that has some maintenance to do, but in essence it's not consumed like glue, for example. And so we have in the inventory here a few spaces where we can work for this kind of projects. And this is a shout out to Anthony, since he's using his own lab. I think we should put that lab into the inventory too, if he wants. He's not obliged to, but that would be a contribution. He's using his own lab to work on the project, and that lab might require some maintenance, consumes electricity, so he might put that lab use into the as a contribution to the project. So the Sensorica lab is used, so I'm going to log the use of the Sensorica lab, and I can say that now on the 30th I'm going to log a lump of time. So I say let's say 20 hours of lab use for prototyping the decanter centrifuge. Okay, so now I'm doing a specific log of this particular space. Okay, we can come back and change that parameter a little later. But now if we go down here, you see that there is something used here, which is the Sensorica lab, and what is logged is 20 hours of time use of this lab. And I can delete this and log again, or if tomorrow I'm going to use another 5 hours of the lab, I'm going to put the date of tomorrow and put 5, and this will add on top of the other one. Okay, so well, that is interesting. Another thing that I could show here is how do you register a purchase if you buy something for the project. So you just create an exchange of the type purchase for Greens for Good. And you go and fill this form, you put the date of the purchase, and you link to the bill that you have received. You put some comments, and then you fill this right part of the form, which allows you to create a resource. Let's say you order something that has never been used before, and it's not in the inventory. You create that resource as you go through this process of purchasing. The purchasing can create a resource in the inventory, or if you buy more filament, you just add to the existing resource. You say, I bought 5 more kilograms of filament for 3D printing, and that will show up in the inventory, and people know that we have some extra filament in stock. Okay. Maybe we can go through another exercise of another input usable input requirement. So for example, we use 3D printers. Let's say if we have some 3D printers, mechanical 3D printer, 3D printer. Well, this is good. So it's a piece of equipment, and this is for print Okay, and so add this usable. So let's see if the system finds 3D printers in stock. What are the 3D printers that are in, when I say in stock, is in the inventory of Sensorica, and I have a few words to say about the inventory. So let's go here, and there you go, 3D printers. Oh my God! So we find a few 3D printers here, and we actually did some work with the ORD FDM 3D printer. So I'm gonna log here 12 hours of use of our 3D printer in the lab. I can put a link to the picture of the print, but for now we just, and I made a mistake here. For now we're just fooling around, and anyway, we can have these logs as having no consequences on the distribution of on the distribution of the budget to people that contribute, right? So very interesting. So now you're looking at this process, which is about design and prototyping of something, and you have all the work that people have done, and then you have all these consumable inputs that are pulled from the inventory, or if there is none in the inventory, you can create a purchase and it gets into the inventory with the proper amount, and then you log a contribution of a portion of that amount that we have in stock. Or usable inputs is all these bigger things like spaces, 3D printers, motors, power supplies, things that could be used for this venture or for other venture, or could be recycled, and that's a ledger of economic activity. What you're looking at here, it's a ledger of economic activity for this particular venture, which is Green for Good. So let me add a little thing here. Now you see this material dimension of this NRP, how it's capable of managing material resources, and taking into consideration how these resources flow into the whole network, and then from that how they flow into the whole into a particular venture or project like Greens for Good. What is interesting here to understand is that you have to put yourself in the paradigm of open networks. In an open network, things are crowdsourced. Okay, when you work in a company, in a corporation, in a co-op, everything that is used and processed belongs to the organization, and that's a major difference with how the NRP handles things. Okay, I mentioned about Anthony's lab, and I said that he could put his lab into the inventory. But also in his lab, Anthony has a 3D printer, and the 3D printer has been used to print the device. So what you see here is something made by Anthony, and the picture here was taken in Anthony's basement, and the thing was printed with Anthony's 3D printer. And a part of that was printed at the lab, the Sensorica lab, with the lab's 3D printer. Okay, so what do we have here? The inventory that the NRP is handling is what we call a pool of shareables. So we are recording how people take their own assets and put them in the middle so that they could be used by themselves or by others for a common purpose. Okay, so Anthony can be at his lab and use his own lab for this venture, and that lab becomes an asset for this venture, and at some point Anthony could say, well, why don't you, TB, come to my house, and we're gonna spend a week together and work in my lab, and then the lab becomes a shared thing. So it's not only him using his lab, it's also me using his lab, and maybe we're gonna have a bigger work party and invite 3 or 4 other people. So his lab becomes the lab where people collaborate. So for a particular period of time, that lab really becomes a shared resource, and everything inside his 3D printer and all the big equipment that is worth that is worth recording or logging into this economic ledger. Okay, so the same thing for the filament. When Anthony actually, I was pointing to the website. This is actually the device that Anthony built, and the picture is in his lab. Sorry, I forgot to transition to this particular document. So now Anthony used his 3D printer. Same thing. It becomes an asset used in the venture, and he used his own filament. $36 worth of this filament. How do I know that? Well, because if I go to the Greens for Good and I look at the contributions, I can see that Anthony has logged 35 Canadian dollars worth of 35. I thought it was 36. 35 Canadian dollars worth of 3D printing filament. Okay, so he created a purchase for that filament, and it's now part of the contributions to the project. So his own filament, which in this case is a consumable. Let me go back here. In this case is a consumable. It's one of the consumable inputs. That's something that he purchased, and he uses it for this particular venture. And then there could be some arrangements. Okay, do you want the budget that we might have to pay for the use of your lab? Do you want the use of your lab to get into some sort of equity in the venture? So you're not getting reimbursed immediately for the use, but it's a contribution that you make for the venture, and this will lock you into for some revenue or some benefits in the future. Okay, this is part of the governance. Now we're going to the governance level. In other words, as we capture the movement, the flow of these physical assets towards the activity in a venture, how do we treat these transactions? How do we treat these events? How do we treat the fact that Anthony used some filament to prototype something? How do we reward or encourage somebody to contribute with physical space? Okay, for prototyping, for meetings, for a variety of other things. How do we incentivize people for purchasing stuff? And once they purchase stuff, if we have some money, do they want to get paid back immediately, or do they want to just have it as a contribution to the venture and log it for future equity in the venture, right? So the key element here is that the NRP captures all these transactions and allows people, because it generates incentives, it allows people to contribute with resources. Okay, so everything is crowdsourced, people's time, people's material assets. Okay, even people's social capital. We haven't put that into the NRP yet, but we had long discussions in the past about how we could capture this type of wealth, which is social capital, your influence. Okay, how you can bring that into a venture for the purpose of, I don't know, getting new participation or disseminating some of the results of the venture. Like this particular device, somebody with good social capital can talk to a lot of people around, and a lot of people know about it, and a lot of people start using it, right? So the NRP is designed to manage tangible and intangible assets of a variety of actors and create pools of shareable assets, tangible and intangible, and create a sort of a ledger of economic activity, which is a sequence of all these transactions, such as Anthony contribute with time for doing the 3D model of this thing, and we had a meeting and talking about it. Anthony contributed with his space of the lab. Anthony contributed with his 3D printer and a bit of filament, right? So all these are transactions, a sequence of transactions that are part of this ledger. And then the idea is, at the governance level, it's what do we do with all these transactions? Once we have them logged, you can do anything you want. Okay, you can play with different way of redistributing benefits, knowing everything that everybody has produced, has contributed with. But now it goes beyond a simple venture. Once you have these motors, once you have these spaces, once you have these 3D printers in this pool of shareables, somebody in another venture, okay, might need a 3D printer. So they go there and the inventory says, well, you have a 3D printer at the Sensorica lab and you have another one a few hundred kilometers away in Anthony's lab. And so that person can decide, should I call Anthony or should I call TB to use or to have them use the 3D printer for my needs in this particular venture? So they become visible to other people outside of the context of one particular venture. So we can now see the role of the Sensorica digital environment as a sort of an incubator and accelerator, where everything people put in common for a particular venture, other people might see in other contexts, in other ventures, and knock on the door and say, could I use this, please? Okay, and the value proposition is, we have this thing, we want to build that, and there will be some benefits in the future, so we can pay you now, or you could log it as a contribution in exchange of equity. So it's the portability of these assets. They're not just, every venture is not just a silo. All these resources are presented as usable resources beyond the scope of one particular venture, like in this particular case, the Greens for Good. Okay. Oof. I don't know how long this video is, but I hope I didn't you're not bored to death. And I hope was eye-opening. Some of the people that hang around on Discord, they most probably know what I'm talking about, and we have to always be grateful to Lynn and Bob for helping us putting this NRP together. We worked long years for developing it, and I want to thank all the other people that are now involved in moving this NRP to the next generation, which is transferring it to peer-to-peer technologies, so that what we do here in Sensorica on a server can become available for everybody around the world, so that an open venture like Greens for Good could become a global venture and not just something that happens on a database in a server somewhere that nobody can see. So imagine this kind of thing on Holochain, for example, or some other blockchain platform. Thanks for watching, and if you have reactions, comments, you can comment on the video, whatever you end up opening. It might be, I don't know, might be YouTube or some other platform. It's good to have the conversations there so other people can see, and not to silo the conversations. But if you have specific questions, just find me on Discord and we can have a little talk about it. Thanks.